Hey everyone, it's Renee Madden, and welcome back to Workplace Revamp. Today we're tackling a tough topic on workplace bullying. It happens in a lot of workplaces, and it's quietly doing damage in companies everywhere. And no, I'm not talking about playground stuff. I mean professional, polish, politically protected kind of bullying that happens in meetings, on Zoom calls, in Slack messages, and behind closed doors. That's the kind of subtle and strategic, the kind that doesn't just bruise your ego, it eats away at your confidence, your performance, and your drive to stay at the firm. So today we're going to talk about what workplace bullying actually looks like, the hidden cost to your business, what leaders can and should do to stop it. So let's move on. Oh, I'm also going to share a personal story about, myself because I've actually worked for a few bullies in my over 43-year career, which is not surprising, right? But it's scary that it still continues to show up in the workplace. And it's actually one of the reasons that I launched my new company, Elevair Dynamics. Yay! And Elevair Dynamics is a consulting and coaching company, and it's designed to help companies and teams rethink how they work and cut out the norms of office politics and workplace bullying. So today we're going to tackle workplace bullying and look at what it actually looks like. In fact, the most damaging stuff is usually quiet. It's strategic and it gets brushed off as difficult personality or leadership style. And in fact, I was once told after being yelled at in a meeting that Renee, he wasn't yelling at you, he was yelling at the situation. Well, it didn't feel that way to me, right? So I think that's when leaders need to think about how they're showing up and how they're treating their employees. So here's what it really looks like. If you've ever been in this situation, and maybe you're not sure, I wasn't always sure, but after speaking to professional coaches and HR and also employee assistance programs, I realized that this is what workplace bullying really looks like. So, one, you're excluded from meetings that you should be in. Your emails are ignored while others get responses. You're constantly questioned or second guessed in front of others. That's one of the worst, especially when it's someone who's important for your team and your boss is questioning you in front of them. That's really not great. You're micromanaged into the ground while others get total freedom. You're criticized publicly and praised privately, if at all. Your projects are mysteriously reassigned, and sometimes you're not even told about it until the new project lead comes to your team and says, "Stop doing this report." Yes, I've been there. Someone may be spreading rumors that you're hard to work with or not a team player, and that's coming from senior people, okay? You're buried in work and other work while your peers are coasting. When you do speak up, you're labeled as emotional, angry, difficult, or too sensitive. Let's be clear, this is not just a bad day. This is a pattern. And if this is happening consistently, you're not imagining things. So let's take a look back at one of my own experiences with a corporate bully. And this happened many, many years ago. I worked with a woman who yelled at people in front of others too. And I don't mean once or twice, I mean on a regular basis. With an audience, she ran on fear and control. That's how she operated. And I think it was also an insecurity on her side because she really didn't know the business, at least not the day-to-day business. So I think she felt like she had to be fearful so people will do exactly what she wanted. She even had a best practices list on how to work with her, which included no gum chewing and no clicking your pen. Okay, so imagine that. A cheat sheet. She created a cheat sheet on how to survive their boss, her. So that's not leadership, that's dysfunction. One day we were in a meeting with, she wasn't my immediate boss, she was my next level boss, but we had to go in at, it was like December 15th. I remember it clearly. And again, this was many years ago, but I had a list of initiatives that I had put together so I could show her what my team was doing. And we put target dates against everything because, of course, you have to have a target date because that's how you push to meet deadlines, right? But not everything is going to happen on the target date, right? And there could be regulatory issues or client responses required before you can actually finish something. And so we went into the meeting with my boss and her, and she was on Zoom. I can see her clearly. And she was very upset because I did not all of my initiatives met the target dates. And it was December 15th. And she couldn't believe that I was telling her this 2 weeks before year end. Well, this is the kicker. Like, the reason they weren't done had nothing to do with me or my team. They were client dependent tasks. We were literally waiting on responses, feedback, and approval before we could clean these out. And some of them were like old regulatory issues where some of the clients were no longer our clients. So imagine trying to get responses from clients like that who were like, hey, we no longer are a client with them. So it was difficult and it wasn't a risk impact to the bank. We were working on it. We were getting things done. So there was really no very small impact. So she knew that, but she needed someone to blame. She was afraid of what she'd have to report to senior leadership, right? She was afraid of getting yelled at, which I get. But that's the thing. This type of leadership where it trickles down and then people are behaving this way because maybe her boss, and I have no idea, but maybe he was yelling at her. But instead of handling it like a leader, she came after me loud in front of my boss, and it was humiliating. Meanwhile, my boss, and that's another story, sat there and said nothing. She did nothing to defend me or speak up and say, maybe we should take that offline or let's look further into it. Nothing. She just sat there quietly. So anyway, what could the bully have done differently? Well, if I were in her situation, of course I wouldn't be happy. And I've been there, believe me, multiple times where my team came to me and said, "Oh, Renee, we're not going to meet these deadlines." Okay, so I would have said, "Let's take a step back and think about what's a reasonable target date to move it to. Maybe it's the next quarter, and then think about what is standing in your team's way to get it done. Do we need more resources? Do we need a letter to go out to clients? Whatever it is, what do we need to do to get it done?" So I think she could have handled it in a more professional way instead of flying off the handle. Now, here's the other thing. If she had flown off the handle and then took a step back and say, "I'm really sorry, Renee, for behaving this way. I'm really stressed and I'm really concerned," there would have been no issue. I would have said, "No problem, totally understand." But that did not happen. And here's the truth. Bullies rarely go after slackers. They target people who perform and perform well. And the reason for that is because their poor performance is threatening, especially when you're insecure and in over your head. And that's where she was. She didn't know the business. She didn't know the day to day. I did, and I was doing a good job. But she needed to make me the scapegoat to make herself look better. Okay. So, why does this hurt more than feelings? Well, here's what I want leaders to understand. Bullying just doesn't hurt people, it destroys business. Because what happens after that happened, I was upset. I didn't get upset in the meeting, but I certainly, it drove my stress level up. And I really had to stop and think about whether I wanted to stay at this company and in this position. And so what happens? My productivity dropped. You can't be creative or efficient when you're walking on eggshells. And that's how I was. I felt like I had her standing behind me. Turnover rises, right? Your best talent, me. I was looking to leave. And that's not great. I had only been in the job for, I think it was less than 2 years. So, and I was turning the team around. Maybe I wasn't the leader she expected me to be. I wasn't tough. I wasn't a bully, but that's okay. Everyone leads differently. And I was getting there. I was turning the team around. And, what happens next? If I leave, others are going to see that, and then morale tanks. The whole team knows what's happening. Even if no one says it out loud, they know. And then trust evaporates. When bullies are protected or promoted, no one believes in your values anymore. You're not living your values if you're bullying others. And let's not ignore the mental health cost. And especially in May, it's Mental Health Month. And this is a tough one. It really does affect mental health. I mean, my stress level was high. I was worried about losing my job. I couldn't just quit. I had two kids in high school and I had one in college. So it wasn't something that I could easily just leave. I had to stay there and I had to take care of it and continue to perform. Some people, they lose sleep, confidence. Oh, my confidence was hit really bad. And in some cases, it can impact employees' health. You don't just lose employees, you lose human beings who used to care. So let's talk about what leaders and companies can do to turn this around. What needs to change? Well, number one, stop protecting high performers who are toxic. Performance without emotional intelligence is not leadership, it's a liability. It's not helpful when people know this person is toxic and no one likes working with them. They're all sitting there on eggshells because of this one person. That's not great. Remove them. If you don't want to get rid of them, I get it, but don't put them in a leadership position. Put them in an individual contributor role. Number two, build a culture where feedback flows in all directions. If employees can't safely speak up, the wrong people stay in power. And this is so important because you can have a manager who you love and employees are really happy, but sometimes senior leadership is like, oh, well, maybe they're not tough enough or maybe they're not strategic enough. But not every leader is going to have all of those traits. You see the post, to be a leadership, you need to have these 10 traits. Well, actually, no, that's not true. You can have all of them, you can develop them, but you may not have all of them at once. And what companies can do is build that. But listen to your team, listen to that feedback. That's so important. And, maybe if it's coming from one person, you may say, oh, I don't know. If it's coming from multiple people, there's a problem. Number three, tie behavior to evaluations. Culture isn't just built on slide decks, it's built on accountability. If someone leads through fear, it needs to affect their bonuses, promotions, and opportunities. And as I mentioned, you may need to remove them from the position that they're in. Number four, provide confidential reporting channels. I've been in companies where they say report something, they have a whole policy around how to report. But the problem is once you report it, it does go to your manager if you don't report it anonymously. But here's the kicker. If you report it anonymously, nothing gets done because they can't interview people without you telling them, who to look at. So it really needs to be more more confidentiality around the process so that employees feel comfortable. They don't feel like their manager is going to retaliate against them. And that happens a lot, unfortunately. And then number five, train leaders to spot bullying and address it. Most people don't know what to look for or are afraid to act. Make it part of leadership development, not a side conversation, not something where you call the person in and say, hey, you got to stop yelling in meetings. No, that's not going to work. You need to have actual leadership training around this behavior. And maybe you can include it as part of empathy training, because I think that's where leaders need to turn to is becoming more empathetic rather than bullying. And again, everybody gets stressed, so you can apologize, but if it's just your normal way of working, that's not great for your employees. So that's something you need to think about. If you're that leader who's been bullying your employees, take a step back and think about how you can change this behavior so that your employees want to work there. They want to work and maintain the values and the mission statement of your firm. So, what can you do if you're the target and it's happening to you? And a lot of times, again, I've been there. I didn't really know what to do. I talked to trusted colleagues, mentors, coaches, and the first thing they said is document everything. Keep a running log with dates, details, and outcomes. That's really important because if it eventually comes to a point where you do have to report it, you want to have the detail. You want to have that evidence behind it. Talk to someone outside your team. If you can, talk to a mentor, a coach, or even a therapist. A lot of companies do have employee assistant programs and they are confidential. But really talk to someone who can help you see it clearly. I did speak to a coach. That was my first experience with an executive coach, and it was wonderful. I mean, when I told her my story, that situation that I went through with my boss and then the senior boss, she said, your boss was like the mother who is allowing an abusive father continuing to abuse his children. That was really impactful for me because I never really saw it that way. But after a while, I actually learned my boss was afraid of her as well. And so that's why she didn't do anything. So that's what happens, right? When you're in that kind of situation. Protect your peace. You need to set boundaries. I know sometimes it's hard, but you don't have to accept every calendar invite or every attack. So if you are being attacked in a meeting by a senior leader, and I did not do this, so this just comes from my experience. It's okay to say, hold on, can we take that offline into a private meeting to discuss the background? It's okay to do that. Build allies. If someone else sees what's happening, don't suffer in silence. Ask for support. Now, it's hard, right? Because a lot of other employees are going to be afraid to do anything. So you have to be careful. You can tell them and speak to them in confidence, but they may not be able to do anything about it, which is unfortunate. So finally, you need to know when it's time to go. I'm not saying walk out today, but if the behavior is escalating and leadership won't act, it's okay to start planning your exit. Start planning a plan B. I had a coaching business alongside my full-time job, and I wasn't making a lot of money, but I was learning. I was coaching, I was learning how to get clients. So there's so many other opportunities out there. And again, I know it's hard. I know it's not easy to just leave a job, especially when you have children, you have a house, a husband, a partner, a wife. It's not easy, but take time to figure out what's right for you. And know this, you're not being too sensitive or angry. I've said this before, like when I reported something, someone told me I was angry. And I said, yes, I'm angry, but you know what? I show up every day and I do my job and I give it 110%. I don't come in with an attitude. Of course, I was angry about the situation, but I didn't let it impact my job. So know this, you're not overreacting, and no, you are not the problem. I've coached leaders, led global teams, and built transformation strategies for some of the biggest names in finance. But this is the work that really matters the most to me. Creating workplaces that are healthy, human, and honest. And this is exactly why I founded Elevare Dynamics, to help companies rethink work and how work gets done and eliminate outdated norms like workplace bullying, office politics, and silence. So I want to stop rewarding toxic behavior and unlock real leadership. So if this episode hit home for you, share it with a colleague or a manager, start the conversation. And if you want to support building a better culture, I'd love to help. Thanks for tuning in to Workplace Revamp. I'm Renee Madden. Let's make work better. Thank you.